Hello, human development students. Today we're going to be talking about relationships in midlife and beyond. So in some ways we're switching gears a little bit or the age range I should say. So we won't just be talking about midlife but into elderhood as well. We only have a few more lectures left after this. We're getting down to the end of the term, and but regardless of that, I hope that you enjoy today's lecture. As a note on the bottom here, relationships today, we're going to be talking about them broadly. So we're going to be talking about friendships, marriage, divorce, and then also different types of parenting. So parenting while one is middle-aged, also caring for an aging parent. So kind of two different roles there, but both are involving caregiving. Talking about grandparenthood, and then also just a little bit about siblings. So obviously it's a broad range of different types of relationships. And again, just to remind you that this is in midlife and also in later adulthood and elderhood. So to start with, I just want to talk about relationship broadly. There's a theory called the socio-emotional selectivity theory, and I really like this idea. This is the idea that individuals become more selective in choosing social partners as they age. So it's one of those ideas where, when we're younger, we may be more likely to hang out with people who aren't necessarily our people. Like they're not going to be the best people for us. They don't necessarily bring us the most joy. Why does this happen? I mean, part of it is that we're people pleasers more when we're younger, but that's not entirely it. With this theory, though, what it says is that as we get older, we're trying to hang out more with people who, one, we can predict how the interaction's going to go. So it's people who maybe are very similar to us in personality, and in that way, we know how they might respond in different situations. Or maybe it's somebody that we just have known for a while, and so therefore we understand who they are and what they're likely to do. We'll also prefer to hang out with people who provide us with emotionally positive experiences. When we talked about this in childhood and who are our friends, yeah, it's also the case that we're picking people who bring us joy and who lead us to have positive experiences. But still, you can imagine that there are people in your life right now that you might still hang out with, even if they aren't always bringing you joy. Or perhaps it's a stressful friend, or it's a friend that you actually need to have a friend breakup with. And so this theory is basically saying that as we get older, in some ways we're getting pickier or more I don't know, just doing what we want to do and doing things that bring us joy. And as mentioned in the second bullet point, this selectivity occurs not just for like romantic partners, but also with friends and family members too. So perhaps you have an elderly individual in your life or somebody who is middle age or older who, has kind of like written off other family members because those family members are stressful. And instead, they're choosing to hang out with family members or keep in contact with family members who bring them more of these positive experiences. Obviously, this doesn't apply to each and every person in the same way. There are individual differences, of course, and those are based on a lot of different factors, some of which we'll get into today in the lecture. So, this first study that I'm going to talk about is a study that was looking at social relationships broadly, although they're looking at social relationships in married men and women. So it's kind of complicating both this idea of marriage, but also how they view other social relationships. And it's looking at gender differences. I should note that this study took place in the Netherlands, and so we could talk about some, important cultural differences for what it might look like in a Dutch sample versus an American sample. But as a whole, it was a representative sample of almost 1,000 adults, and you see that the age range goes from midlife until elderhood, 40 to 85. One of the key criteria were that they were living independently. Okay, and essentially, they had four main hypotheses. The study was more complicated than I'm going to present here, But I just wanted to show you how ways in which men and women might be similar and ways in which men and women may be different. So each of these H's represents hypotheses. The first hypothesis they had in this particular aging survey was that married men and married women would have similar social networks. So the social networks are the people that are important to us that provide support and companionship. And so they were saying that they believed that there would be no reason to believe in this Dutch sample that married men and women would differ. So both in the size of how big is your social network and who are the members of the social network. As part of that first hypothesis, they also said that there shouldn't be differences in not just the size of the social network, but in how much support and companionship you're getting from that social network. For hypothesis number two, they said that men and women wouldn't be any different in how much they report negative experiences in those personal relationships. So it's any kind of personal relationship, not just within the marriage. So again, hypothesis one is no difference in size and composition or availability of the social network. And hypothesis two is no difference between reports of negative experiences. They also reported no difference between loneliness in married men and women. And much of this they were talking about in the context of marriage. So some people, even though they're within a marriage, still report being lonely. And for hypothesis four, that quality of marriage, so you could talk about marital satisfaction, for example, will be associated with loneliness similarly in men and women. So we'll get more into that when we find the findings, but just no difference. So you see from hypothesis one to hypothesis four, they're not predicting differences between men and women. And this is interesting because in a lot of findings from the US and in American samples, we do see some differences. And so these researchers were interested in looking at Dutch society because of more egalitarian views and roles that men and women have. But again, we can talk about how much, this would differ in a US sample looking at all four of these hypotheses together. So let's get into some of the findings. So this first hypothesis really had three main parts. So the first part is, do married men and women differ on the size of their social network? Do men and women vary on the composition of their social network? And do men and women differ in the availability of support or companionship in their social networks? And so let's look at their findings. For the size and composition of the social network, you see that they found similar findings for men and women. So in terms of the number of people and both like who did they include in their core social network. So children were frequently named. Remember, these are participants between the ages of 40 and 85. So again, some of these might be adolescent children, some of them might be adult children. Most often followed by other family members, so mentioning siblings or in-laws as part of their core network. And both men and women both named at least one friend and their married partner in their social network. So the size and composition did seem very similar between men and women. Now, just think about this in your own life. Like this, essentially, this question is asking, like, who are these core people in your life that you could go to for support, and who would be there for you? Essentially, that's the question that they were asked. It's not, I mean, all of our support networks are going to vary in size and composition, but they didn't find any gender differences. For the Part C, availability of support and companionship, there were some differences. So, women reported having more providers of emotional support. So, of the people that were in their core network, they would say that there are more people who would be there for them emotionally to support them. But they also said that they received more requests for emotional support than men. So they're both able to go out and ask and will receive that support. But also women say that there are more people coming to them, which can be a lot on their shoulders. So this is a substantial gender difference for this social support. Let's talk about the other hypotheses.